All right, welcome to our very first video on programming in Java. This is intended for computer science students. A couple quick notes before we get started. Java is an object-oriented programming language. It was invented in the 90s. It is popularly used around the world, and for that reason, we feel it's a good first programming language for students to learn. Before we get started, we actually need to have a special kind of software to program in, and that's called an IDE. It's our developer environment that allows us to write our code, to use our code, cleanly develop our code. I'm going to recommend that you go get BlueJ. So I'm going to put two links in this video. One is the link to make sure you've got the most updated version of Java. The other one's to make sure you've got this special piece of software. The one that I recommend for brand new beginners is called BlueJ. The icon looks like this, and it's a free piece of software, really slick, really easy to use. I like it because it's so lightweight and it's not trying to do too much for you while you are a new programmer. So go update your Java, download BlueJ, install it, come back to this video. Once you're back, here is how to write your very first program. So you're going to want to click this button right here that says New Class. And a class is like an individual program file. This is going to run our program, is this class. The rule is when you name a file, it should start with a capital letter, and we smush all the words together, there's no spaces, and every new word also gets to start with its own capital letter. So if I was naming this project Space Needle, then it would look something like that. We're going to do Hello World. Hello World is the traditional first thing you learn in any programming language. You ask the computer to speak back to you the words "Hello World," and it's as though the computer itself, I don't know, was its own entity speaking to you, which is pretty cool. So click New Class, make Hello World, click OK. You should get something that pops up that looks like my Hello World right here. Obviously, you don't have these other classes in yet, which is totally fine. Go ahead and open that up. When you look inside, there's going to be a bunch of starter code in there. We actually don't want any of the starter code. So when you open it up, just highlight everything and delete it. There should be a bunch of code that BlueJ has tried to give you that you just don't need. All right, so I'm going to go through the syntax of how to write Hello World. It's going to be goofy. I'm going to break it down once it's done, but the first thing you need to know is that you need for every character to be exactly the same as the ones that I write on the screen. If you're off by one symbol, one letter, if you capitalized when you shouldn't have or lowercase when you shouldn't have, then that'll cause problems as well. So here comes our program. We say public class, and then we reiterate the name of our file. In this case, it's Hello World. We need this particular word right here to match the name of our file. And we open a curly bracket. Java is full of a lot of interesting symbols that we use. The curly bracket's an important one, and I'm going to talk about it in a minute, but we do an open curly bracket here. My rule for new programmers is if you ever open a curly bracket, make sure you close it as well. I'm going to put the closing curly bracket down here to give myself some space to work. All right, the next thing I need to do is write what's called the main method, and the syntax is public static void main string args. Notice my usage of these bizarre box brackets right here, and we also have an open curly and a closed curly. The curlies I can talk about right now determine the area in which you're developing either your class or your methods. Classes can be made up of multiple methods, and then methods themselves can have multiple statements. And so we use curlies to say when the class starts and when it stops, when a method starts and when it stops. All right, so the last thing you need for Hello World is this system.out.println for open quotes, open parentheses, then some quotes, Hello World, end quotes, close parentheses, and a semicolon. And if you've followed every character closely, you should have something that works. Before we try to run it, it's worth noting that in Java, we need a proofreader of sorts. We allow Java to review our code and make sure that we use the correct spelling and grammar. It turns out if I'm missing one semicolon, if I don't have a curly in the right spot, if I forgot to capitalize system, this just won't run. And even though computers are powerful, they are really inflexible when it comes to this kind of thing. So I'm going to click compile. We see it's this button right up here, and it's Java's way of proofreading my code. Hey, did I do it correct? If I got everything right, it should say class compiled, no syntax error. If you get to this point and you get some red warnings, read the description that's in this box down here, and it might tell you, hey, you made a mistake. Like if I forgot this semicolon and I went to compile it, it would say, check that out, semicolon expected. And you're like, oops, yep, sorry, Java, I got you. And you compile again, and you're good to go. All right, so we've compiled it. It works. By the way, the shortcut for compiling, because I recommend you compile often to make sure you have no errors, is going to be Control K on a Windows machine and Command K on an Apple. Super handy. All right, so once we've written our code, it compiled, it's all valid syntax, we head over here, we go to HelloWorld, we're going to give it a right click, and we head down to the main method. That's this part right here. And I'm going to go ahead and click on that. It asks if I want to provide any arguments at the time of execution. That's what args stands for. For the purposes of our class, we're almost never going to do this. It is something you'll need to know about, but it happens quite late down the road. So we click OK, and a third window pops up. This is called the console. Console is very important. Its job is to show us all the things that we've printed. It's thought of as the window into your code. So whenever you're outputting things, it shows up in the console. I have a couple recommendations. When you set up your console, turn on clear screen at method call to make sure that your previous execution's results are not still in the console when you make a new execution. I also recommend unlimited buffering. For some of our projects, we're going to run 60, 70, 80 more lines of printed output, and BlueJ has this habit of trying to clip that. You can go and turn on unlimited buffering. If you're on a Windows machine, this options menu is down here. All right, so we can write a whole bunch of cool things. For instance, I could write system.out.println Falcon Power. Perfect. Compile that, and away we go. I can run the main method, execute that, and we see Hello World, we see Falcon Power. Because I'm using print line, each thing appears on its own line in the output. If I had used just print instead, I invite you to go experiment with that. I think you'll see that they end up on the same line. I guess I'm just going to demonstrate it for you right here. There it is. They get smushed together on the same line. Okay, so more broadly, what is it that we're looking at? An analogy that I've heard that I've really liked is that writing code is like writing an essay, in that it can constantly be revised and improved, that even if the logic is sound, the readability is important, in that the authors can have wildly different styles. And a good way to think about it is that if you were writing an essay, well, your class is like your essay. It encompasses the entirety of the program. Your essay is made up of paragraphs, and your methods are like paragraphs. You are likely to have multiple methods in your classes, and it takes multiple methods to make up a class. Lastly, I would say that there are multiple statements that make up a method, and those statements are like sentences. And so it takes multiple statements to make up your methods. It takes multiple methods to make up your class. And that is how a program is composed. Okay, that's everything I've got for you for today. Thanks very much.